Okay, let's just jump straight into this explainer because what we're looking at today is, honestly, it's pretty mind-blowing. We are exploring the discovery that our conscious experience isn't some static, always-on state. Instead, it's a rhythmic, deeply hierarchical performance. You know, we usually think of our brains as these continuous computers smoothly crunching the world around us. But what if I told you the literal architecture of your consciousness is actually a pulsing, highly structured rhythm?
Take a look at this quote. Rhythm is not decoration. Rhythm is the architecture of consciousness itself. It perfectly sets the stage for us. It's not just that our brainwaves happen to oscillate while we think, right? It's that these rhythmic cycles are the physical structure of our thoughts. They're literally the gatekeepers, dictating when a sight or a sound gets to enter your awareness and when it's completely locked out in the dark.
So here's the big mystery. How exactly does a flickering, tiny local signal in the brain suddenly become a massive, global flash of conscious awareness? To answer this, we have to stop looking at the brain like a computer. We need to look at it as a masterful flamenco performance, where different frequencies actually nest inside one another. Think about it. At any given millisecond, your brain gets bombarded by billions of sensory inputs. How does it grab just one, pull it from the noise, and turn it into a conscious thought you actually feel? Well, what's absolutely fascinating here is how perfectly the scientific reality of cross-frequency neurocoupling maps onto traditional flamenco rhythms. In flamenco, you have this slow foundational compás, or rhythm, holding the whole structure together, while incredibly fast, intricate footwork dances light inside of it. Our brainwaves do exactly the same thing. The slow waves literally, physically hold the fast waves. Act 1, the deep container, delta, ranging from zero point 0.5 to 4 hertz. So, we start our neural performance at the very bottom with delta, the deepest and slowest rhythm of the brain. This is where we find attractor basins. Basically, these are rhythmic waves that act as dynamic containers. They hold and shape neural info, so preconscious representations don't just fragment and fall apart. The crucial point here, without these deep attractor basins holding the signals together, our thoughts would instantly scatter. It's kind of like a literal bowl. A fast, preconscious thought is a marble dropped in. The bowl, created by these slow waves, holds the marble steady so it doesn't just roll off the table before it becomes part of your actual awareness. Much like the raw tona in flamenco, a song sung completely bare, without any accompaniment, delta is that deep, unconscious foundation. It's the slow container that keeps our neural activity from becoming orphaned. Because it beats so incredibly slowly, it establishes the large-scale temporal structure we need for that attractor principle to even work. Delta actually holds the slightly faster theta waves safely inside it, which secures our emotional and memory frames.
Act 2, the still center. Alpha, pulsing between 8 and 12 hertz. As the rhythm rises toward the cortex, we meet the alpha oscillation, which acts a lot like the solia, the still meditative center of the flamenco performance. This brings us to phase-amplitude coupling. This is the mechanism where the phase of a slow wave strictly controls the amplitude and timing of a much faster wave. This isn't a metaphor, folks. A slow wave is physically opening and closing a gate in your neural tissue, deciding exactly when the fast, active waves are allowed to fire. Now, people often think of alpha as just zoning out or relaxing, but it's not a passive resting state at all. It's an active inhibitory sculptor. Alpha is a rhythmic shudder that modulates our thalamocortical circuits, the pathways pacing the sensory relays arriving from the outside world. It's actively suppressing irrelevant sensory noise from the environment, so we don't just completely short circuit from a chaotic stream of data. It sculpts exactly what sensory evidence is allowed to reach the next level. Let's look at this timeline, because this is wild. Conscious access can only occur during a tiny permissive window when the alpha gate drops open. We're talking about a narrow trough of just 20 to 40 milliseconds inside every single alpha cycle where the inhibition relaxes. That brief, fleeting window is your brain taking a super quick snapshot of the world, asking, okay, anything important right now? Before slamming the shutter closed again. So how does this rhythmic alpha gate actually control the brain's global broadcast? We know the gate opens and closes, but what is waiting on the other side to trigger an actual conscious thought? To find out, we need to zoom all the way down to the cellular level. Act 3, the coincidence. Layer 5, pyramidal cells. The transformation of those sensory relays into actual awareness happens right here, in the layer 5 pyramidal cells, the primary broadcast nodes of the cortex. And these cells are basically brilliant two-compartment coincidence detectors.
Down at the bottom, the basal dendrites are getting raw bottom-up sensory evidence from the environment, which creates a flickering local attractor. Meanwhile, up at the top, the apical tufts are getting top-down contextual feedback, memory bias, and expectation from your higher cortex. These cells demand that our raw sensory evidence perfectly matches our brain's expectations. And when they do, we get BAC firing, backpropagation activated calcium firing. It's a massive, nonlinear spike triggered only when basal evidence and apical expectation coincide perfectly. This explosive dendritic calcium burst is the definitive moment that a local flicker becomes global awareness. But again, it requires incredibly precise timing.
Act 4, the broadcast, achieving conscious access.
In flamenco, they call this moment of pure, transcendent insight duende. And neurologically, it happens in a literal flash. Look at the steps of this neural remate. The alpha wave opens the permissive trough window. The basal sensory evidence perfectly meets the apical top-down expectation. A massive BAC calcium spike is triggered, and boom, the layer 5 neuron unleashes an explosive global broadcast. If the inputs don't meet exactly while that tiny alpha gate is open, the signal just dies, and you remain completely unaware.
Because of this massive burst, your brain ensures only context-validated perceptions survive. It transforms that flickering local attractor into a global state and deepens the attractor basin. It gives the signal enough power to trigger thalamic re-entry, creating whole brain synchrony. It literally blasts the signal out to the rest of the network so you consciously experience what you're seeing or hearing, keeping you sane and focused. Act 5, the Nested Flamenco, the hierarchy of life.
What we are left with is this beautiful, unified architecture where information isn't held by just one wave, but by the living relationship between all of them. Delta provides the slow container, theta integrates the emotional frames, alpha acts as the inhibitory sculptor, gamma computational packets burst through the gates, and layer 5 coincidence locks it all into conscious access. In this nested hierarchy, delta holds theta, theta frames alpha, and alpha gates gamma. It makes rhythm the literal architecture of life itself. Consciousness emerges not from a single frequency, but from the synchronized, living relationship across all layers of the nested hierarchy. And here is the craziest part. You are experiencing this exact sequence of nested rhythms right now, seamlessly converting the sounds of my voice and the visuals on screen into your internal awareness. Your layer 5 cells are performing millions of these phase-constrained coincidence tests this very second, validating evidence against expectation, perfectly timed to the beat of your alpha waves. Which really brings us to the ultimate question. If our conscious awareness is just a perfectly timed coincidence within a nested rhythm, what actually happens to us in the milliseconds between the beats? It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? If our awareness is just a series of discrete, pulsed frames passing through a gate, what infinite possibilities are washing right over us in the dark spaces when the shutter is closed? Well, that's definitely something fascinating to ponder until next time.